very warm welcome to all of you on the behalf of Press Information Bureau and the Directorate of Film Festivals. In the delegation, we have with us first Mr. Salas Dayakar, the director of Free State, which depicts the forbidden love affair between a white girl and an Indian male during the apartheid times in South Africa. Second, we have Mr. Mandala Dube, the director, and Ms. Lerato Luis Montoyedi, the producer of the film Kalushi, the story of Solomon Kalushi Mahlangu. Mahlangu was an icon of the South African liberation struggle against the apartheid system in South Africa. We have Mr. Thapelo Makina, the actor from the film Mrs. Right Guy, which is a captivating tale of a woman's search for the right guy for herself in life. Last but not the least, we have Mr. Paul Egan, who's the producer of the movie Tess, which is an emotional tale of a pregnant sex worker struggling to prevent her past from swallowing her present. So I would request one by one to from the delegation to share their experience with the media members during the making of their films. We'll start with Mr. Salas.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you once again for the ministry and everybody involved in organizing this festival and for the big privilege to be here. Free State was a 2-year process. It was a first sort of step to tell a story that involves a very authentic South African story, but also involved Indian people. In South Africa, Indian people are a lot forgotten in the history, and they played a big part in it as well. And that was a great privilege for me to be involved in writing the story in the first place, and learning a lot about the culture, and then combining it with the South African culture which the story is told. It is in essence a forbidden love story, and probably a classic Romeo and Juliet situation, but in this story we focus more on the relationship between the parents and the children, and the effect this relationship have on the the effect of the forbidden love relationship on the relationship in the families. Yeah, it was great for me to work also with crew members from India. Mr. Rajiv Tervatkar is an Indian producer who got involved. He's from Sangli in Maharashtra, and I also worked with the editor of this film was Mr. Abhijit Deshpande. He's done I think he's actually a national award winner editor, and we had several other Indian people on the crew as well, and it was a great collaboration. And as I say, it was. I hope it came across in the story that doesn't matter from what religion you are or what ethnic group you are. When it comes to your children and love, we all act the same.
Thank you, Mr. Yaka. That was a brilliant description of a movie. Now we come to Mr. Mandala Dube and Ms. Lerato Luis. Both are associated with the movie Kalushi. So, ma'am, you can go first.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I come from the story Kalushi, the story of Solomon Mahlangu, and I work as an associate a producer. The story of Solomon Mahlangu started as a stage play a few years ago, and we realized that there was a lot of appetite, and then the director decided that the story should go to the big screens. So the story will be showing this afternoon at 2 o'clock, and hope you guys will enjoy it. And basically, it's a story about an ordinary boy from a township in South Africa who became popular because he was one of the first youngest person to be hanged during apartheid. We worked with people from the United States. I mean, our cinematographer was from the United States, and also our editor was from the United States. So I think the director will give you more information on the story.
Mr. Dubey, would you like to add something?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for, first of all, to BRICS for allowing us to come and screen the film here in Kalushi, and for hosting the delegation from South Africa. And Kalushi, as Lerato has just mentioned, is a coming-of-age story of a young man from the township of Mamelodi who found himself recruited into the liberation struggle by the African National Congress. He's a reluctant hero who once is in the movement, goes into his first mission, and in that mission something goes wrong, and he finds himself charged with the murder of 2 innocent people. But I think it's best that you come and see the film at 2 o'clock, which will be screening at the Auditorium 2. The process took us, I would say, about 8 years, to where now we've done our festival runs. We premiered at a festival in South Africa at Rapid Lion, South African International Film Festival. Then we went to the Cannes Film Festival, where it screened in the market. And we went to Zanzibar International Film Festival. And we've been invited to several film festivals, one in Edinburgh, in London. And we are here at the BRICS Film Festival in New Delhi. And yeah, I mean, I think it's best that we'll engage with you with your questions. It's I don't think any of you have seen the film, but it's when you come at 2 o'clock, you'll enjoy it, I hope, and then we'll take it from there. And I'm the director.
Thank you, Mr. Dubey. Yeah, that was an interesting description. Sure, we'll see the movie. Now, from 2 movies on the apartheid, we come over to an interesting title, Mrs. Right Guy. We have Mr. Thapelo. Could you tell us about the interesting title and the movie, please?
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, my name is Thapelo Mokoena. I'm an actor, producer, African storyteller, African filmmaker, and I represent a beautiful country, South Africa. And specifically, this very interesting title movie, Mrs. Right Guy. I'm one of the lead actors on the movie. The movie was produced in 2014. It was made in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. But what's interesting about this film specifically is the fact that it's one of the more colorful black films to come out of South Africa in the recent years. You know, we've sort of, as black films and black cinema, excuse me, and specifically South Africa, we've taken this interesting journey into more than just a struggle story, more than just a story of our past, more than just the story of oppression. You know, we've started to tell more colorful stories. And what's become beautiful is that we're starting to see stories of love, black romance, black relationships being depicted on screen, which is an interesting journey. And Mrs. Right Guy is one of 3 successful rom-com films that have come out of South Africa. So we're definitely on a nice and interesting journey into exploring more than just the downside of who we are as South African people. What makes it interesting as well is the fact that It's produced by a team of female producers, and the lead actress is female. You know, I'm a supporting lead next to a female super lead, and this is also what makes the journey for Mrs. Right Guy, and most importantly, films in our country special. You know, we're entering into a beautiful space where we're adding more layers of color and more different perspectives into our stories. So yeah, I mean, I'm here to speak about us making that film, what the film has done, and potentially where we're going with South African or African storytelling. Thank you.
We'll take the questions in the end. Thank you, Mr. Thapelo. That was an interesting expression, colorful movie of black love. That was interesting. So, in the end, we come to Mr. Paul Egan, who is the producer of Tess. Please.
So, Tess was only finished in June this year. BRICS was its first screening outside of South Africa. It hasn't had a theatrical release yet. That's only happening next year. Tess is a story about a sex worker in a seaside suburb of Cape Town called Muizenberg. Her turning point is she finds out she's pregnant. And essentially, as the story unfolds, we find out how she got to where she is in the first place. It's a very hard-hitting film. We do challenge a few boundaries. The female lead puts in a fantastic performance. She's in 99% of all the scenes. We collaborated with a double Grammy Award-winning composer, Christopher Tin from the United States. Also, Molly Stenskard, who's Lars von Trier's editor. She consulted for us, and Linda Mann, who's a Danish editor. So it's a very different feel in terms of South African movie, and yeah, we're keen to see how it's accepted, what the response is. So far, it's been very positive, but you know that's been a very skewed audience to date. In terms of coming to BRICS, certainly found it inspiring, being blown away by the quality, the precision of movies from other parts of, or from other countries that make up BRICS. And I think one thing is to walk away inspired. The second thing is to think, how could we collaborate with filmmakers in these other countries and perhaps make films together?
Thank you, Mr. Egan. I'm sure we have an interesting basket of movies here, and we'll all love to watch them, and they will do very well. Now I put the house open for questions from our panel. Anyone can ask.
Yeah, hello to everyone here right now. Actually, I need to ask something about the movie The Right Guy, Mrs. Right Guy. Yeah. So you stress on first on black relationship. Don't you think is a human relationship more important than black or white? And the second question is about you stress on female lead. Is a news in South Africa?
Is it new? Did you say new?
Is a news? Is something extraordinary there in South Africa to be a female lead in a movie?
Right. I definitely think it's more important to tell the human story than the story of black love. But what's interesting is that our movies, as South African films, have not portrayed this. We haven't really seen ourselves as black South Africans on screen in that way, except for the past 3-4 years. You know, of course it's a human story. That's where it begins. It's always about a human journey, but the truth of it, or the fact of it is, this is new for us. Consuming ourselves on big screen in this manner has become a new thing, and it's a journey that should become a normal journey. I agree with you, and it should just become a human journey. But it's refreshing that our cinema, South African cinema, is now sort of playing in that space. I mean, it's a no-brainer that we should have been playing in that space for a very long time. But it's quite interesting that it is that way. And it's the fact that we have a female lead extraordinary. It goes back to what I just explained. We also haven't had a lot of female leads in our films. It's pretty new. I mean, I think to see a female lead in Tess is quite new and refreshing. She's in 99% of the film, as you said. She carries the whole story. Similar to Mrs. Right Guy. I mean, if you come and watch it today at 5 p.m., you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But the whole story is carried by our character, Gugu. Her name is Gugu. And the story revolves around her life, her relationship life. You know, she gets married in the story, and her husband leaves her, disappears on their honeymoon. So she has a particular perception of men, and she sees men in a particular light when we meet her at the top of this movie. But what's interesting is the journey she goes through and the men she interacts with, one of them being my character. So, extraordinary? Yeah. Should it be extraordinary? I don't think so. I think it should be normal that Africans see other Africans on screen, or black Africans rather, see other black Africans on screen, being happy, being sad, being colorful, not colorful, action, comedy, drama. You know, it's a fresh space for us.
I just want to add to that is I think what the problem for a long time is we didn't have female-driven stories, and I suppose that and it was a big problem, and it was addressed a few years ago. I remember, I think it was at the 2011, 2012 SAFTA Awards, which is our national awards for movies and television, and there was actually not an award for lead actress because women were basically marginalized in our stories as a trophy or a complication, where it's incredible to see 5 years later that in 3 movies sitting here, it's a female lead, and the female is leading the story. And I think women in South Africa have for a long time just been marginalized as mothers or as lovers, and they pushed aside. Yeah. And I think it is very encouraging to see this changing, and we're also working back towards a balance again, you know, because obviously now you've got a flood of this coming, and especially got a lot of female producers as well, which is great, and this tells their story and their perception of the world, which I think is very important, and this didn't happen for a very long time in South Africa.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just elaborate on what Salas has just said there, and piggybacking on what Tapelo has just said. For a long time, we didn't have filmmakers who could be able to come out there and give a voice to the voiceless. You know, it's South Africa has seen in the past 20 years, even before then, films being made, but the auteurs, who are the filmmakers, were pretty much focusing on one perspective and one side of the community, and the story, the narrative was always seen from a particular point of view, where you didn't have, yes, black filmmakers go out there and tell their own story. So there is this explosion of black filmmakers. Yes, we're filmmakers, but in a country as South Africa, where you are finding us now picking up the cameras, writing the stories, and asserting ourselves as producers, it's very exciting. And there's a bigger issue that's also happening, where you are seeing black filmmakers collaborating with white filmmakers, and it's not an issue as it was in the past, which is great social cohesion for our country. You know, so when you see a female lead in a film, it should be ordinary, but it's extraordinary in the sense that you haven't seen them before. You know, and when you see a black filmmaker goes and tells a story and they articulate it so well, you know, it's something to be applauded.
Thank you. Any more questions?
I have a question here. I mean, this is a BRICS film festival, So I'll be talking more about the joint cooperation between the two countries. There is a lot of common between, common things between India and South Africa. Gandhi is one of them. There is democracy, fight for the democracy, that's there. So what about film cooperation between film, joint production, right? Do you think both the governments are doing enough for any joint production of movies or cooperation in both the sides? Do you think both the governments need to do more? What it can be? What can be your ideas? I mean, you are here, and you know a lot. There are producers, there are actors, directors are there, and some ideas like maybe the government should on both the sides extend some kind of financial support, or the clearances and all that, and maybe the tax exemptions. When the movies are shown, there is a huge lot of taxes on in India especially. So can there be some tax exemption? If you have any idea on these, joint production and cooperation between India and South Africa, if you can say something, give any wild ideas you have, we can include that. Thank you.
Mr. Terence Kumalo is here from government. Well. He's the boss.
Well, he's going to speak on behalf of what you said in specific about government. But as filmmakers are the ones that are going to initiate what government should perhaps will take a lead from what government says. But at the end of the day, government is not in the business of making films. They're in the business of facilitating that the environment should be conducive for the filmmaker. So I think it's best that he answers that.
Yes. Yes, I understand.
Yeah, but can we just allow him to be able to respond on behalf of government, and we'll tell you, we got lots and lots of ideas. Don't you worry about that.
Okay, we'll let Mr. Terence speak, hear his views.
Okay, thank you. As I've said, my name is Terence Kumalo from the Film Agents in South Africa. With regards to the co-production treaty, I'll tell you that there's a draft which is currently being looked at by both state law advisors in the two countries. Co-production treaty between South Africa and India, we're working on that. And from an incentive side, there are incentives this side, there are also incentives in South Africa. But filmmakers will only be able to qualify for those incentives if they come through an official treaty. So the two governments are cognizant of the relationship and the common heritage or the synergies between the two countries. Hence, we are strengthening that relationship. And the BRICS Film Festival is just but the first step towards strengthening that. And as for the filmmakers, well, they can speak for themselves, but I think as well they would also touch on this platform as being the first step, because this is their first, for most of them, interaction with the filmmakers from India and the rest of BRICS countries.
Thank you, Mr.
I just want to add something. Hello. So just to add to what, I think it's best that he answered it that way, because now you know that there's something in the pipelines, and they're working, the two governments are working towards something. But from where I sit, first of all, how many of you know Durban? Of Durban. Do you know of Durban in South Africa? Durban is the biggest Indian population outside of India. That one province, KwaZulu-Natal, where I was born, where I'm from, where I grew up, I lived in an Indian community in South Africa, in Durban. It's a no-brainer that we have co-productions, that we trade stories, war stories, stories of love, any kind of stories, because we know so much about each other. And like you've just said it, we have so much in common. So as an actor and as a producer and as a filmmaker, I believe it should have been done ages ago. We should have been telling those stories a long time ago. The love stories between South Africa and India. There's so many ways you can do it. It's in the way we write these stories. It's in the way we put together our characters in these stories. And we have a budding film industry as South Africa. We have a very fast and progressive film industry. You, as India, have one of the biggest film industries in the world, if not the biggest. Now, here's what I see. Think of not only South Africa, but see it as Africa. The numbers alone, India and Africa, stories traveling throughout Asia or India and stories traveling throughout Africa from a joint perspective can only breed success and profitable films and successful stories. So it's a no-brainer, my sir. It's a long time coming, and like Terence just said it, this is our first date. This is the first date, and BRICS is a beautiful initiative to make sure that we collide energies in that sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the second date. Perhaps in practical terms, what's been clear to me is, when was a Russian film, for example, last distributed on circuit in South Africa? I'm not aware in the last 20 years. And that goes for other BRIC nations as well. So we're not seeing films from other BRIC nations and vice versa. So one is, if this festival could then move on to the second date, which may be a market, we can talk about distribution and maybe some formalized channels to link up writers, producers, directors to actually conceive projects together. I think in terms of practicality, those are two things which would help, and I'm sure there's many more. But I think ultimately, from a wider overview, it is, we're operating separately, and there is an opportunity to collaborate and do joint stories, do joint productions. It could be facilitation, it could be shooting in India for a South African film and vice versa. But yeah, I think bodies like the National Film and Video Foundation and the equivalents in other countries, I know they're still finding their feet, but I'm sure we'll find ways to take this further.
Well, incentives are obviously going to be governed by what the different governments have in place. But I just want to, I'll come back to the incentives thing. Recently, Salas worked on a project which screened here, Free State, and he tried to get an actor from the Bollywood industry to perform in the film, but he failed in as far as convincing that actor, because the actor wanted certain perks that were obviously ridiculous in a sense of what the budget that Salas had. But had, for instance, government intervened, Salas could have gotten that actor to come to South Africa from India, and maybe those perks could have been picked up by the government agencies. For instance, Air India could have flown him here, there, to South Africa, first class. He wanted to have a trailer and all those things. Those things could have been picked up, because he's a local superstar. Is that a way of putting it? So that those are the little things that can help filmmakers, because when you write, and it starts with the writing. If you don't have a good script, we can cry all we want here about Indian co-productions and South African co-productions, but it'll never happen because we don't sit down and write. And I think filmmaking is more about relationships. You can't force us to work with, you can't force Indian filmmakers to work with South African filmmakers and vice versa. It's at these kind of forums where we meet, we come up with ideas, and then we say, hey, that can make a great film. Okay, how do we get going in as far as writing the concept and the script and so forth? So I think the first and foremost thing that the government agencies could be able to do is to, perhaps in the next BRICS film festival, is to have a writing workshop of some kind, to say filmmakers that met at the BRICS, at the inaugural BRICS Film Festival, submit their concepts and ideas to the organizers of the BRICS Film Festival, so that when it comes up next, there's a workshop and say, okay, what have you guys developed in between, and as far as the script is concerned? Is it a first draft, second draft? But to have a talking shop about filmmakers from India co-producing with South African filmmakers, and there's no tangible story or script, it's absolute nonsense. Nothing's going to happen. But we've got to be able to sit down, guided obviously by the government agencies, to write particular stories. And South Africa or Southern Africa and India, we have been trading way before we could encounter Europe. You know, we've been trading. I mean, I see a couple of people nodding their heads. You know, I'm going back to 800 AD, 1200 AD, and so forth. There was trade going back and forth. You know, so there are stories that you could tell that are big legends that you could just make epic and so forth. You know, so yes, it's up to us as filmmakers to do so.
Thank you so much. I think this cooperation is going to go even higher from this very good start of the first BRICS Film Festival here. And I've been informed that co-production panel is also on the way. So we'll have to wrap it up soon. So I thank you all for coming here and interacting with the media. And
It hasn't started?
Oh. Okay. So any more questions? If you want to say something.
Well, so there's a BRICS bank, so maybe there should be a BRICS film fund.
No, I think I do agree. If I can just add, I don't want to repeat everything that I said, but I think it's something that needs to happen naturally. Good art is something it's a process. I always tell when we're making films, I tell everybody involved, trust the process. And I think things like these exposure that we're getting, you must remember we are in comparison a very young and a very small industry in comparison to all the other BRICS countries. And we are finding our feet, and we are going through that process of first on screen trying to figure out our past to know where we come from, and now we're moving to a place where we're telling modern stories of people now. And I think the next step will be for us to combine our stories with either India or Russia or wherever in the world. But it's a natural process, and it's as a performer, you learn from a very young age is that you have to work all the time as much as you can in order to be ready when those big chances come along, so that you can actually do what you need to do and reach the potential that you should. So I think from my point of view is I think this is something, and I mean, I've been very privileged to be involved in one of the first projects in combining the two countries and telling a love story between an Afrikaans girl from South Africa and an Indian man. And I think more of these sort of stories will be made shortly, you know. And I think if we trust the process of how things grow naturally, and we don't force it, we will get the best results for everybody involved.
Thank you, Mr. Yes.
I have a question for Larry too. Apartheid is still a very sensitive subject in India also, and I think there also the people are very sensitive about the subject. How difficult it was to picturization this subject, such as a sensitive topic for you?
Sorry, how sensitive was it to?
It's a very sensitive topic in India and both Africa also.
Yes.
How difficult was picturization of this topic?
It was very difficult in a sense that, for example, we had to go and talk to, first of all, ask the rights to tell the story of Solomon Mahlangu from the mom and the brother. So for them to retell the story of what happened to their son, it was quite difficult. And it wasn't only from the black side of the history, also from the white side of the history. It was very difficult because there's also lives that were lost in both sides. So when it comes to apartheid stories, that's our history. You know, you get some people that don't really want to talk about it and say, let's move forward. But we feel that we must, you know, continue telling the stories so that something like this never happens. So we'll see how it does in cinemas, if there's still appetite for that. But yeah, it was quite difficult, especially going back to the families, and even I remember when we went to the prison where Solomon Mahlangu was hanged, and the guy who was working as when they hanged you in those days, you had to go up 56 steps, and the guy was retelling the story and walking those 56 steps to where you got hung. And the guy just broke down, and we had to go back again. It was just emotional, and yeah, a very difficult story to tell. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions?
I think before you close, see Kalushi at 2. It's at 2 o'clock, right? Just those of you who have not seen the film, come out at 2 o'clock and witness it for yourself and understand the story of Solomon Mahlangu. It's a special story to us as South Africans. As a result, we still have a very important holiday, June 16, that is in memory of that uprising, that story, so check it out, and also see Mrs. Right Guy at 5 o'clock today to see the lighter side, the colorful side, the romantic comedy side of things. And yeah, thank you. And practice does not make perfect. Practice makes permanent. So the more we try, the more we attempt, the more it becomes permanent in us. So the more we have these kind of initiatives, the more we collide energies, the more we find opportunity to work together. Keep that with you. One love and respect.
Can I just say something? Actually, talking about the Indian relation and South African relations, Solomon Mahlangu, you see in the story, Solomon Mahlangu's lawyer was actually an Indian lawyer, Ishmael Ayub. So very powerful lawyer, who actually ended up also being Nelson Mandela's, before it was Nelson Mandela's lawyer, and became Solomon Mahlangu's lawyer. So there's Indian history in that. Yeah. So I wanted to.
Thank you, all of you. We'll surely look forward to watching all the movies, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.